If you have a non-profit, how can you transcend the crisis and go from surviving to thriving? When we come back, we're going to be talking to Alana James. She's the CEO of the Sunflower Fund, and we'll find out how they've been able to pivot and thrive during the crisis. So don't go away. We'll be right back. If you're just joining us, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Brigitte Lambanda. Warm welcome to our viewers on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Periscope. Welcome to us to the show, and please do join us in the comments. So if you've got a nonprofit, how can you transcend the crisis and go from surviving to thriving? Our guest today is going to be Alana James. She is the CEO of the Sunflower Fund, and we're going to find out what they've done to pivot and thrive during the crisis. But first of all, Viola, my co-host, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm doing very, very well. Just been anxious the last few days about the whole conversation around the Western Cape peaking. And so, just have gone back to start looking at stats again. There was a time when I just stopped. I think everybody just stopped watching the news. But now, of course, with the whole peak, it's renewed interest. And they're talking about us that the province might get to 1,000 infected people a day. So yeah, I've been watching that, and I think there's a little bit of anxiety around that. But otherwise, I'm doing really well. Excited to speak to Alana. I do need to share a little secret with you. She is my injection of energy. So when I call her, she and I just, as soon as we answer the phone, we just spew compliments at each other. Like, I use words like fabulous and amazing and all of that. So every day I'm having a slow day or a not so good day, I pick up the phone, call Alana, and we just compliment each other. And so she is amazing. So I'm excited to speak to her.
Wonderful. We all need a ball of energy in our lives, don't we?
We do.
So before we bring Alana onto the show, just a little bit of a background. Alana has got a simple work ethic. She says, do the right thing passionately and enthusiastically, but always have time for family. Very important. She has a progressive and professional approach that encompasses all aspects of business, from strategizing to getting into the trenches with junior staff. She prides herself on being resourceful, which is a useful skill in the nonprofit sector. She chooses to see the potential in all situations and people, and says it's come in particularly handy in a recently acquired string in my bow business coaching. Alana says the magic is about helping people find the power within them and then see how they too can change the world. So I think let's bring Alana onto the show, shall we?
Great idea.
Alana, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Alana. Thanks so much for being with us and agreeing to be on the show. So I'm really excited about having you here. So, but let's get going. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about how you got to where you are, little highlights about your career, family, etc. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great, thanks so much. So I'm a mum to two. And I think just right now experiencing, I suppose, the challenges all parents have within the current crisis, trying to just manage normal family life. So that's really a focus. A little bit more about me is, so I love my role in the business coach space of things. I use it in my everyday life and definitely in my role leading the Sunflower Fund. The Sunflower Fund, I've been there for the last 5 years. It's definitely been, I think, one of the most challenging and exciting roles I've had. I've always been within the corporate space, really focusing on building brands, developing strategies, and really focusing on growth and development in the organizations I've worked with. And I've always just had such a passion for the NGO sector as a whole. So throughout my entire career, I've always done work in the NGO sector in various, sort of different pods and sources. And I realized what an amazing untapped space our corporate world has seen in line with the NGO sector, and that they're not really that different and they're not that far apart. And so building strategies and working in the NGO space, I found myself working with the Chamber of Commerce, which is where I've met Viola, and another eye-opener to see the great collaborations that there are out there and how do we bring that in the space. So I've really focused my career on building networks, building support structures, and just really focusing on growth and development of the people I work with, the projects I work in, and really trying to find sort of a mesh in all that, all the learning from the corporate space, from the NGO sector, and from my family life, and kind of trying to make the best and the greatest impact that I could have in that space. So I think that's a really quick, just kind of snap at how I've worked through my career space.
Yeah. So Alana, just a follow-up question to that. What would you say is the relationship between the NGO sector and the formal corporate business sector?
Well, I think there's not just one relationship that's important to mention in the space. I think the first thing is that for a lot of NGOs who haven't been in the corporate sector, there's a huge amount of learning that we can do. I think it's part of the successes we've seen over the Sunflower Fund over the past many years is that we really operate like a business, just a business that's a force for good. And I think that's one of the big learnings that we should take from the corporate sector. I think there is such a collaboration in the two. If I look at the work that the NGOs do and the services the corporate sector provides, I think if we want a thriving economy and we want communities that are not just surviving, but really thriving in our space, I think there needs to be a closer working together and a closer understanding of what the two sectors deliver from both the corporate as well as the NGO side, and really focus on what are those synergies and collaborations. And I think we can find a synergy with every corporate and in every NGO. And that for me is probably two of the biggest partnerships that we find.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Alana, for those of us that's watching the show that may not know much about the Sunflower Fund, since, I mean, in South Africa, it's very well known, but since we've got an international audience, could you tell us a little bit more about what the objectives are of the Sunflower Fund?
So the Sunflower Fund, partnered by DKMS, we are a donor center and a stem cell registry. What that means is we provide education and awareness around the need for stem cell donors, as well as just the general awareness of blood diseases and blood disorders. Our main role, however, is to recruit stem cell donors. And those are donors who would be available for a patient in need of a life-saving transplant. These are patients who are diagnosed with over 70 different types of blood disorders. And through the process of their treatment, for many of them, their only chance of survival is to have a stem cell transplant. And for that, they need a matching stem cell donor. So the Sunflower Fund, we will recruit those donors and we will facilitate the search as well as the matching process for a donor and a patient, and then facilitate that all the way up to transplant. So that in a nutshell is what we do.
Okay.
And is that globally, or is it or nationally, or just locally?
So we recruit our donors across Africa, focusing really on our donors in South Africa. We are part of an international body. So when we recruit a stem cell donor, you are available for a patient anywhere in the world. So you form part of an international database of potential donors really there to save the life of a patient somewhere in the world. Our partnership with DKMS is quite an important one on our global scale, DKMS being the largest network of donor registries in the world, having facilitated more than 85,000 donor-patient matches, and currently more than 10 million donors are registered on the DKMS registry. And the Sunflower Fund, partnered by DKMS, forms part of that family of donors. So we work on an international basis, supporting both patients and donors globally.
Wow. Okay.
Wow, that's
So
phenomenal.
that's just amazing. Alana, so we speak about lockdown, and we've been speaking a lot about how it's actually affected small businesses, and we've really had to just a lot of small business owners have literally had to close their doors because of the it was the unintended consequences of lockdown. But with the Sunflower Foundation, how has the lockdown actually affected the delivery of the Sunflower Fund? How has it affected the delivery of you guys getting to your objectives and actually delivering on some of the projects that you have?
So in the beginning, it was incredibly challenging. We rely on fundraising efforts, and that is through the events that we host. And with no public events, we've had to cancel all of those. Also, all of our recruitment is generally done face-to-face at universities or community projects or at community events, and that's where we'd recruit our donors. So not being able to have a face-to-face conversation with a group of people to provide information and recruit them as donors, it has been incredibly challenging, I think, to start off with. We then really had to look at how could we adapt? How could we adapt what we do? How do we learn to be connected with people, but keeping social distance or physical distance, but not social distance? I think that's been the trick. And then really being incredibly agile, not only with what we have to do as an organization, but also with our teams, having our teams work from home and have them set up and able to deliver the service. And then what we've also realized is our standard needs had changed so dramatically, or our patients' needs. So where the needs used to be, I need a donor, I need financial assistance to get to transplant, or I need psychosocial support. Those were really the three key things we were answering for a donor. However, all of a sudden we start getting calls from our patients to say, well, the problem I have is I can't get to the hospital to get my treatment. And that's never something really, as the Sunflower Fund, we've been involved in. We had a donor stuck in Johannesburg that came from the US, but with lockdown, we closed our travel and they weren't able to come to Cape Town where the transplant needed to take place. And suddenly we find ourselves in a whole new world trying to negotiate private chartered flights and getting approval from government and support from police, etc. And then we have patients who not only can't get to their treatment, but suddenly they aren't able to get to the stores because of the high risk, or their jobs have been at risk, like many of us, and they now need funds so that they can just manage their medication and their food. And I think it's realizing that to serve a patient, we need to think differently, and we need to be someone different to be able to achieve our same objectives. And I think that really has been the challenges we faced, is that we've just quickly have to be agile.
That's amazing. Yeah.
It absolutely is. I think, if anybody told us 6 months ago that we'd be here, I think we would say, you're joking. That would never happen. And it's a constantly moving target. It's constantly evolving and changing, and operating in this climate of uncertainty, as it were. So how has the Sunflower Fund been able to pivot in this climate of uncertainty, and how have you Have you been able to raise funds? How have you done it? Because I think that's the major question people want to know. I know, for example, you had a concert. So people want to know, how did you do it under these different circumstances?
Well, I think to answer the question within a very short space of time is there's really two things. One is our staff. And I think, if you don't have the right staff to support very quick leadership decisions, you really will struggle. And that has really been one of our saving graces, is we've had to make really quick decisions on changing protocols, changing processes, and we've kept the communication with our staff incredibly tight. They've been well informed, and therefore they've been able to be really supportive. So for me, the staff have to come first, because any decision and any action you need to make really quickly, you have to have your staff on board. So that, I think, was the first win for us. And secondly is partnerships. Without our partnerships, I don't think we would have made it through the first 3 months of our lockdown that we faced. I think we would still be struggling. If you look at the concert that you spoke of, yes, we've managed to put on a concert, raise funds. Our funders, we've been in touch with them again. They've committed to continue their support for us. And it's really been the partnerships. When we've looked at needing to change how we operate as an organization, there were so many different needs. So if you look from how we've serviced a patient in the past to how we would service them now, we needed to bring the Department of Health on board. We needed to work with other community leaders. We've partnered with NGOs that, yes, have been in our circle, but we've never actively worked with them before, and we've had to do that. And we've created new and bigger partnerships, and the partnerships we already had, we went back to them, we revisited them, we looked at how do we amplify what we're doing together to be able to serve our patients in a greater degree now with the current crisis. So, how have we managed to pivot? I think really, if you can get your staff on board and you keep them well informed, because it's a terrifying space to be in for anyone. Globally at this point. And I think when you're relying on your salaries and you're worried about how your kids are getting to school, or family members that are at risk, emotionally we've had to be there for our staff more than what we've needed to before. And I think for not only NGO, I think even corporate, but if you want to make it through the challenging times now and ahead, I think focus on your staff and focus on your partnerships, because you really cannot do this on your own.
Okay, so Alana, we've just gone through, so as a country, as a province, we've gone through so many crises. I mean, it's just been we've had the water crisis, then this happened. And we always talk about the fact that we've got a new normal, there's going to be this change in behavior and so on. But we do find that a lot of people still go back to the old behavior. But what about the new things that you've adopted, new behaviors that you have adopted that you think will actually stay with you as an organization post-COVID?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things is our almost weekly reviews. And what COVID's done for us is great, because it showed us that actually, there's weekly changes. And Viola, you mentioned this earlier, we now, if you look at our numbers this morning versus our numbers 2 days ago, it's changed. If you look at how lockdown has impacted us, what you can do, what you can't do, it literally, our lives are changing on a day-to-day basis. And I think as NGOs or as companies, or as leaders, we've really gotten into this mindset of, we do quarterly reviews or we do monthly reviews, and we reassess if we could improve or, what the challenges were. And the one thing we've learned from COVID is that that's actually happening on a weekly basis. We're weekly assessing, and it's not just about there's a changing environment, are we adapting? It's about, in our current scenario, how can we improve what we do? And we're doing that on, I want to say a weekly, but it's more like a day-to-day basis. So that's the one thing I think that will stay with us as a huge positive, is that it's not about a quarterly or a monthly review. It's about a day-to-day, what are the needs? How is that changing? The other thing is, strangely enough, we've kept physical distance, but I have found during this lockdown period with our staff, we have been more in contact with our staff now than what we were before lockdown. So we have regular staff huddles. We have one-on-ones in each department. We check in with our staff to see how they're doing. And it's not just how's the work going. It's how are you managing? How's your family? Are you okay? And I think we've always been a caring organization at the Sunflower Fund, and we call it being part of the Sunflower Fund family. But we've really taken it that step further to really understand the different scenarios that our staff face. And for the first time, we've realized what staff actually go through, because we don't always share that level of personal, even when we're doing our sort of social connects. And I think understanding the mindset of our staff and realizing how this is impacting them. And as I said, suddenly we have this greater level of connection because we're more distant. We don't see each other in the office every day, but we're on the phone and we're having engaging conversations more often. So I think that's become, I suppose, really impactful for us. And the other thing is, what we've realized is these really sort of, whatever platform you're using, your online meetings, the hour meeting, the 20 minutes driving to get to a meeting, we've realized how productive we can be without that. And so meetings are down to 30, 45 minutes. And then we'll say, listen, hang on the call for another 15 and we'll grab a cup of coffee and chat. But there's just focus. And because it's such an effort. It's so different for us to have to log onto your computer and have a meeting with someone. But it's become the norm, and we've realized how we need to make it more productive for us. So there's lots of little online tools and how we manage our online space that I suppose we've taken for granted before. So those are things I think that beyond COVID will serve us exceptionally well.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of lessons in there. I mean, the things you've shared now can be used across so many different sectors, not just the NPO and NGO sector. And I really do like the fact that, you talk about the human connections. In any type of business or any organization, it's about connecting on a human to human level with people, because once you have that kind of understanding, you can make almost anything work. I feel like we've entered the era where people have taken off the coats and ties and the facade that they may have had in the boardroom, and people are truly being who they really are. And I think, moving forward, that's going to be great for business, because we do, one of my favorite sayings is that people do business with people, not a business card, so show your human side, share your vulnerabilities. Because, then we really connect with one another, and then we're more engaging and we see, well, how can I help this person? It's a heartwarming when somebody says to me, can you make a donation? Jimmy is the father of so many children. This is what his wife does. This is where his mother is. And aren't you then more open to wanting to support that business because you understand the dynamics?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I also feel that if you're building a partnership with someone, those partnerships is what gets you the support. And I look typically at the concert. I even look at this call. I mean, this call is because of partnerships that we've built. Yes. And I think that, that's really where we get the support from, that we can lean on our networks and the connections that we've made over our years.
Yeah. Alana, a question to you. One of the things that I've realized is that you have become a very strong voice in the NGO sector. Lots of people speak about you with lots of respect, your integrity, your ability. But just in terms of the sector, what other tips and comments would you like to make in terms of how NGOs, how NGOs who are struggling can still transcend? Because I think it's quite important that they understand that they can actually lift themselves out of this crisis. So yeah, we spoke about staff and we spoke about, the sort of human connection and partnerships. Are there any other tips that you would actually like to advise other leaders who find themselves in your position who haven't actually been able to pivot as effectively?
I think conversations. I mean, I couldn't sum it up in a better word than to say have conversations. And what you'll realize is that the people you serve, others are serving as well. And therefore, there's opportunities in that because their needs are so different that we have to adapt. But very often, if we're serving a specific community, I just had a call a couple of days ago with an NGO in the food security sector, and they do cook meals into certain sectors. And they really are struggling because their funding isn't coming in. And all we've done is we've connected them with a few others who are serving the same community that they serve, not necessarily with food, but they serve with health checks, or they serve with providing sanitizers, and they provide education. And what you realize is that if you really want to serve any customer, you have to serve them holistically. It can't just be your service. But yet we're always told we have to be focused. So if you are serving food, you have to focus on meals, and you have to focus on that delivery. But you could partner with people who bring a whole lot of other things to the table. And suddenly you're not just serving food, you're serving this holistic need that somebody in the community has. And it's only through conversation that you can actually identify who's working in the same communities, and they don't have to do the same thing you do. They could do something completely different. And through the conversations you have, you can find opportunities that bring even more value into the same space. And I think you just have to have those conversations, and you have to be open to make a difference and to make a change in what you do. So you can't just deliver the service the way you've always done it. You have to be prepared to go slightly outside of your comfort zone to achieve your goals. And the one thing I want to recommend to the NGOs that really are struggling out there is that you're not alone. Because we are all committed to serve the same people, the same communities, there are so many people who want to see you succeed, who realize that those communities need you. They need your service. They need your staff. And just have those conversations and find people who are there to lift you up, who are there to give you ideas or to share those conversations with you, because we do hit quite a few walls, and we have to, we really have to swallow the no's. I think everyone gets them. And you've got to find the people who are your yes people, and who will have those conversations that will inspire you to go and relook at what you're doing, revisit your plans, revisit your partnerships, and just have those conversations.
And, the one of the main reasons at the end that this Cappuccino Club was even started was exactly to have those conversations. I mean, we talk about inspiring change to conversations, and I absolutely believe that, when you just start talking to people about what some of your challenges are, one person's going to say one thing that's going to change the way you think, and that's really about inspiring change. So, I couldn't agree with you more. Conversations are so, so important. And then, of course, I think the follow through on the conversations is something that I would say, one of the things I absolutely love about you, Alana, is that the fact that it's not just, you don't just talk, you would get onto the phone and make those connections. It's the same thing Brigitte does, the same thing I do. We follow through on this, it's not just about talking about what I could do for you. Yeah. It's actually saying, and so just give me a second. I just want to make that connection quickly. I just want to sort of contact that person and send an email or send a WhatsApp message. And it's not always easy because it requires a lot from you. It does take that one conversation sometimes requires a whole 15 minutes of engagement afterwards. But I think it's really through the conversations that we will inspire change. So, yeah, I agree with
Absolutely. And I think exactly what you've said. I mean, I think you've really capped what I was trying to share really well, because it's about the conversation, but if it doesn't lead to action, it's just air. Make the conversations mean something, make them valuable. And like I said, there are so many people struggling out there. And actually, the only thing they need is your conversation or your idea or one contact that you have, is actually what will make or break that organization. So as much as it is about going after those conversations, I think for the people who are finding that they've made the pivot or where they've got the success at the moment, I think it is our duty to then provide the other end of that conversation and to be open to those conversations, because I think we can get very absorbed into our own crisis. And you know what, to take 5 minutes to have a conversation with someone is really not a lot to ask. And I mean, I still experience people who are not willing to have that 5 minutes, but there are just so many who are, and those are the ones we need to focus on.
Absolutely.
Alana, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the amazing pearls of wisdom you've shared with us and with the audience about the NGO space and how to pivot during a time of crisis. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alana. Thanks for being with us today. Thank you.
That was amazing. And tomorrow, not tomorrow, but on Wednesday, I'm also really looking forward to our conversation about the tourism sector.
Yes.
Because that's been one of the most hardest hit sectors during this crisis. And so we're going to be having Enver Mali on the show to talk about what's happening in the tourism sector. So do join us again on Wednesday to find out what's happening with the tourism sector. And thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye, everyone.